You've been lied to about being alone. They told you it's something to fix, something wrong with you, a problem that needs solving. They made you believe that a woman by herself is incomplete, tragic, missing something essential, and you believed it. Until one day you closed the door, turned off your phone, and felt something you weren't supposed to feel. Relief, power, clarity. That's when you realized solitude isn't your weakness, it's your weapon. And the world has been trying to take it away from you since the day you were born. Here's what we're going to uncover: the psychological mechanisms that turn being alone from something you dread into the most dangerous tool a woman can possess. We'll explore Jung's theory of the persona and why it crumbles in solitude, how your nervous system literally rewires when you stop performing for others, and why history has always feared women who choose their own company. This isn't philosophy, this is survival strategy. Think about the last time you were truly alone, not lonely, scrolling through your phone, filling the space with noise, truly alone with yourself. How long did it take before the discomfort set in? That restless feeling, the urge to reach for distraction, to check if anyone needs you, to make yourself useful. Jung understood something profound about this discomfort. He saw that most people live what he called borrowed lives, following scripts written by the collective. For women, this scripting runs deeper than most realize. You're handed a patchwork persona stitched together from fragments of what makes you palatable, productive, desirable. Be nurturing but not needy. Be ambitious but not threatening. Be beautiful but not vain. Smile. Make it easy for others. The persona is that social mask you wear, the role you play to survive in a world that rewards compliance. And here's what solitude does that nothing else can. When you're alone, the mask has no audience. Without an audience, the performance becomes absurd. The persona withers. What remains is something raw and infinitely more real. Yourself, that center of your psyche that exists independent of any gaze, any judgment, any expectation. But this isn't comfortable. When the persona falls away, you're left facing what Jung called the shadow. All the parts of yourself that society deemed unacceptable. Your rage that was called unladylike. Your ambition that was called selfish. Your sexuality that was supposed to be packaged for consumption, but never expressed on your own terms. In solitude, there's nowhere to hide from these rejected parts of yourself. You meet them face to face. And here's the weapon. A woman who has integrated her shadow cannot be emotionally blackmailed. She knows her own darkness so intimately that external criticism loses its toxic sting. When someone tries to shame you for your anger, your boundaries, your refusal to accommodate, and you've already met that part of yourself in the silence of your own company, their words slide off you like water off stone. You've already had that conversation with yourself. You've already decided what you'll accept and what you won't. This is sovereignty. Your nervous system knows something your conscious mind often denies. Social interaction, especially for women conditioned to monitor and manage everyone's emotional state, is exhausting at a biological level. Cognitive psychology reveals that constant social engagement requires what researchers call error monitoring. Your brain is perpetually scanning for threats, reading micro-expressions, calculating how to adjust your behavior to avoid conflict or rejection. This keeps your stress hormones elevated, cortisol flowing, your body in a state of chronic vigilance. Solitude acts as a biological reset button. Without the need to decode others' facial expressions or modulate your responses to maintain social harmony, your parasympathetic nervous system finally takes over. Your body remembers what it feels like to just be, rather than to be for others. Many women carry a trauma response called fawning. It's the automatic impulse to please, to smooth things over, to make yourself small to avoid conflict. This response gets wired in early, often in childhood, and it becomes so automatic you don't even notice you're doing it. You say yes when you mean no. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You prioritize someone else's comfort over your own clarity. In solitude, this response has nothing to trigger it. There's no one to please. And in that space, something extraordinary happens. The fog lifts. You start to notice the difference between what you actually want and what you've been conditioned to want. Between your genuine yes and your people-pleasing yes. This discernment is a weapon because it makes you immune to manipulation. You can see the strings before anyone tries to pull them. History has always been afraid of women alone. The witch in the forest, the spinster, the woman who chose her own company over marriage, over motherhood, over the prescribed path. She was dangerous not because she hexed anyone, but because she proved something terrifying, that a woman could be complete without fitting into the roles designed to contain her. When you choose solitude, when you discover that you don't wither without constant connection or validation, you're committing an act of psychological civil disobedience. The patriarchal structure and consumer capitalism both rely on your attention, your emotional labor, your belief that you're incomplete without a partner, without children, without the right products to make you attractive enough, good enough, enough. Every moment you withdraw your attention from this marketplace, you create an energy surplus. You're no longer spending yourself trying to meet impossible standards. That energy returns to you. And suddenly you have resources you didn't know existed. Time, mental space, emotional bandwidth. These become yours again. The psychoanalyst Clarissa Pinkola Estes wrote about what she calls the wild woman archetype. She argued that civilization domesticates women's instincts, shearing away the very qualities that make them powerful. Intuition, fierce protectiveness, the ability to sense danger before it announces itself. Solitude is where you grow these instincts back. Estes talks about deep listening, which she calls listening with the whole body. Your intuition is actually a rapid-fire pattern recognition system, processing thousands of data points beneath conscious awareness. But social noise drowns it out. The constant chatter, the expectations, the need to appear reasonable and not too sensitive. When you're alone, regularly, deeply, you start to hear that inner voice again. And it tells you things. It warns you about people before they show their true colors. It guides you away from situations that look good on paper but feel wrong in your gut. A woman who trusts her instincts is dangerous because she can't be fooled. She detects lies, inconsistencies, red flags that others might rationalize away. She knows when something's off, and she acts on that knowing. In recent years, there's been a reclamation of solitude through what writer Francesca Spector calls alonement. Not loneliness, which is the painful absence of desired connection. Alonement is the intentional cultivation of rich, fulfilling time with yourself. This is practical magic. Our brains are wired to seek dopamine hits, those quick bursts of pleasure from likes, messages, external validation. Social media has weaponized this, creating an addiction loop that keeps you hungry for the next notification, the next proof that you matter to someone out there. Alonement breaks this cycle. It trains your brain to produce serotonin, the deeper, more stable happiness that comes from being absorbed in flow states. Reading a book that makes you think, creating something with your hands, walking in nature and noticing the world without narrating it for an audience. These activities recalibrate your reward system. You stop needing constant external input to feel okay. And here's where it becomes a true weapon. When your solitude is genuinely nourishing, the bar for letting someone into your life rises dramatically. Economists talk about something called a reservation price, the minimum you'll accept to make a deal. If being alone is wonderful, peaceful, creatively rich, then the cost of admitting someone into your life goes way up. You'll only accept connections that enhance what you already have, relationships that are better than your solitude. This eliminates probably 90% of mediocre, draining, or abusive connections before they even begin. You're not desperate. You're not trying to fill a void. You're selective because you know what you'd be giving up: your peace, your energy, your sovereignty. Most people will not meet this standard, and that's exactly the point. Virginia Woolf wrote about women needing a room of one's own. She was talking about physical and financial independence, the material conditions necessary for creative and intellectual freedom. But today, we can extend this idea into psychological space. Having a room of one's own in your mind means that even in a crowded room, even in a stressful job, even in the middle of family obligations, there's an internal sanctuary no one else can access. A place where your thoughts are your own, where you don't have to explain yourself, justify yourself, make yourself digestible. This internal room is where you remain uncolonized. The world will try to tell you who you should be, what you should want, how you should measure your worth. But if you have this inner chamber where you regularly retreat, where you know yourself beyond anyone's projections, you develop what I'd call ideological immunity. You can hear the messages, the advertising, the cultural programming, and you can evaluate them against your own truth. You're not easily swayed because you've spent time figuring out what you actually believe, what you actually value, separate from the noise. Let's talk about what happens in a woman's psyche during prolonged, quality solitude. There's an initial phase of withdrawal symptoms. If you're used to constant stimulation, constant connection, the silence feels oppressive. You'll want to fill it. Check your phone, turn on the TV, call someone. This discomfort is actually your nervous system detoxing from the addiction to external validation and distraction. It's the same mechanism that happens when you quit any substance your body has become dependent on. The craving doesn't mean you need it. It means you've been using it to avoid something deeper. Push through it. What comes next is remarkable. There's a settling that happens, like silt in disturbed water slowly drifting back to the bottom until you can see clearly again. Your thoughts stop racing quite so frantically. The urgency to be doing something, being someone, proving something, it softens. And in that softening, you discover that underneath all the performance and panic, there's a quiet presence that's been waiting for you. This presence doesn't need to justify itself. It simply is. This is the self Jung spoke of, the center of the psyche that exists before socialization, before trauma, before the world told you who you needed to be to survive. Your thoughts start to organize themselves differently. Without the need to constantly explain yourself to others or anticipate their reactions, your internal dialogue shifts. It becomes more honest, more exploratory. You start asking yourself questions you've avoided. What do I actually want from my life? Not what I'm supposed to want, but what I want. What am I doing that drains me? What lights me up? Who am I when no one's watching? These aren't abstract philosophical questions. They're deeply practical. The answers reshape how you spend your time, who you spend it with, what you say yes and no to. Jung believed that individuation, becoming who you truly are, requires periods of withdrawal from the collective. It's in solitude that you differentiate yourself from the mass psychology, the groupthink, the inherited beliefs that aren't actually yours. For women, this is particularly vital because so much of what's handed to you as truth is designed to keep you serving others. Solitude is where you commit treason against these inherited lies, where you decide that your life belongs to you, not to your parents' expectations, not to your culture's definition of womanhood, not to some imagined audience judging whether you're doing it right. Just you. This is terrifying to a world that profits from your compliance. A woman who has defined herself through solitude, who knows what she wants and what she won't tolerate, who isn't afraid of her own company, can't be controlled through shame or social pressure. She's already had the conversation with herself. She's already decided. There's a particular kind of clarity that emerges when you spend extended time alone. Colors look different. You notice things. The quality of light, the texture of silence, how your body feels when it's not performing or defending. This isn't poetic nonsense. This is your nervous system finally down-regulating enough that you can perceive reality without the filter of chronic stress. When you're constantly in social mode, managing impressions and navigating dynamics, your perceptual field narrows. You're on alert, fight or flight, fawn or freeze. But in solitude, especially in nature or in quiet domestic space, your awareness expands. You start to feel yourself as part of something larger, not in a vague spiritual way, but in a deeply embodied way. You're a creature. You have needs. You have rhythms. You have an animal wisdom that gets drowned out in the constant noise of civilization. Women are taught to override this wisdom constantly. Smile when you're uncomfortable. Be nice to people who scare you. Ignore your gut. Stay in situations that drain you because leaving would be rude or difficult. Solitude gives you back your animal sense. And once you have it back, you can't unknow what it tells you. The shadow work that happens in solitude isn't just about acknowledging your rage or ambition. It's about integrating all the parts of yourself that were split off to make you acceptable. Your sexuality that exists for your own pleasure, not someone else's consumption. Your competitiveness. Your ruthlessness when necessary. Your capacity to say no without guilt. Your indifference to what people who don't matter think of you. These aren't flaws. They're aspects of a complete human being. Carl Jung observed that what we resist persists, and what we deny in ourselves, we project onto others. Women are taught to deny so much. Your anger becomes depression. Your ambition becomes anxiety. Your boundaries become guilt. In company, especially in relationships where you're trying to be loved or approved of, these parts get suppressed. You perform the softer version of yourself, the manageable version. But alone, there's no reason to fragment yourself. The energy it takes to maintain that split, to keep certain parts of yourself locked away, it's exhausting. In solitude, you can finally put down that burden. You can be whole, mean when you need to be, selfish about your time, unapologetically focused on your own goals. Not because you're a bad person, but because you're a complete one. And the more time you spend in this wholeness, the harder it becomes to betray yourself in social situations. You've tasted integrity. You know what it feels like to not split yourself into acceptable pieces. You'll protect that fiercely. Here's what makes this truly dangerous to systems of control. A woman who requires solitude, who has structured her life to include regular periods of withdrawal and self-communion, is building something that can't be taken from her. Relationships end. Jobs change, bodies age. But your capacity to be with yourself, to find richness and meaning in your own company, that's portable. That goes with you everywhere. It's a kind of wealth that doesn't depend on external circumstances. And once you have it, you stop making decisions from scarcity. You stop settling. You stop tolerating the intolerable because being alone is worse. Being alone isn't worse. Being alone is where you remember who you are, where you reconnect with your purpose, where you hear the voice that knows your truth. This voice gets drowned out by others' needs, others' opinions, the constant negotiation of social existence. But it's always there, waiting for the quiet, waiting for you to come home to yourself. The world will tell you this is selfish, that prioritizing time alone means you're cold, antisocial, damaged. Let them say it. These judgments come from people who are afraid of their own company, who need constant external validation to feel real. Your solitude threatens them because it suggests an alternative. It suggests that you don't need what they need, that you've found something they haven't. And rather than investigate their own relationship with solitude, they'll try to shame you back into the fold, back into constant availability, back into performing connection even when it depletes you. Resist this. Your solitude is sacred. It's where you're forged into someone who can't be bought, can't be flattered, can't be manipulated through fear of abandonment. Because you've already learned the deepest secret. You're not abandoned when you're alone. You're found. This journey into solitude isn't about rejecting all connection. It's about changing the terms on which you connect. Coming from wholeness rather than lack. Choosing people because they add something beautiful to your already rich life, not because they fill a void. This distinction transforms everything. Your relationships become collaborations between two sovereign beings rather than desperate attempts to complete yourself through another person. You bring your full self, shadows integrated, instincts sharp, boundaries clear. And you only stay as long as it serves your growth and theirs. The moment it becomes diminishing, you have the strength to walk away. Because you know what waits for you in the silence. Yourself. Whole. Powerful. Free. What we've explored here is the psychological and spiritual architecture of how solitude transforms a woman from someone seeking approval into someone who knows her own mind. From someone fragmented by social expectations into someone integrated and whole. From someone dependent on external validation into someone who validates herself. This isn't a one-time achievement. It's a practice. Regular withdrawal into your own company. Regular listening to the voice beneath the social self. Regular honoring of what you know in your bones. The more you practice this, the more you become someone the world cannot shake, cannot diminish, cannot control. You become a woman who walks through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who has looked into her own darkness and emerged knowing exactly who she is. And that, more than any external power, is what makes you truly dangerous. If this resonates with you, if you're beginning to understand your solitude not as something to fix but as something to cultivate, I want to hear from you. Share in the comments what your relationship with being alone looks like right now. What fears come up? What freedom? And subscribe to this channel because we're going to keep exploring these territories that psychology and spirituality often avoid. The raw truth of what it means to become yourself in a world designed to keep you performing for others. Your solitude is your birthright. Claim it.